Greetings designers, so today I'm going to show you guys how you can create a vector portrait on Adobe Illustrator. When we're talking about a portrait, we're talking about a recognizable image of a person or an animal, like you guys can see here. We're going to use Illustrator so that we can create that really flat design style, where we have these really flat areas of color and every now and then we'll have little marks to kind of show a sense of form and a sense of texture in our portraits. If you can look at my layers panel, you can see that I isolated the drawing from the reference image that I used earlier. It's missing because I need to relink it. But this gives you an idea of how I'm going to approach using a reference image and then create a vector drawing out of it. For starters, I'm going to go to File and New. I'm going to select the Print preset. And I'm going to select letter size and I'm going to call this Vector Portrait. I only need one artboard, so I'm going to click Create. Now typically, whenever we are working in Photoshop, we basically go and open an image because Photoshop is an image editing software, and when we open an image in Photoshop, we're basically embedding the image in there. In this case, we're only using Illustrator to create the drawing part and using the image as reference, so we're not going to embed the image, we're going to link to it. So it's a different process to go and open the image within Illustrator. I already downloaded an image, so I'm going to go to File and Place, and I'm going to look at my Downloads folder, and here's the image that I want to use as reference today. When I place an image in Illustrator, I'm basically linking to it. I'm going to click and drag to make my image bigger. You can make it as big as you want it to be. And I'm basically going to position it right over here on my document. In fact, I know I want to make the dog a little larger, so I'm just going to resize it now. Okay, now I'm going to go to the Properties panel. And before I start locking this image in place, I want to lower its opacity. The image is just going to be a template. I'm basically going to be tracing the contours of the image and then filling those in with different colors on Illustrator. So I'm going to make sure the image is selected, and then in the Properties panel, I'm going to lower the image opacity to about 50%, 40%, whatever is going to let you be able to see the image but not distract you from all the drawings that you're going to be doing on top. So that's the image with a lowered opacity of about 50%. Let me just align it properly. Now what I want to do is I want to lock the image in place. You can see right here, if I flip to my layers panel, that I basically have that one layer called layer 1, and it has the linked image. If I were to go and delete this image from my downloads folder, I'll show you what I mean. Here's my downloads folder. So if I delete it, my downloads folder, I'm going to get an image saying some files are missing or modified. Would you like to update them now? And I would need to do so if the image is deleted accidentally from my computer, or if, let's say, I work from another computer and it doesn't have the same image linked to Illustrator. So it's just something you need to be conscious of. I'm actually going to go and take a moment and restore my image. Okay. I just restored my image, so I'm good. What I'm going to do now that I lowered the opacity is I'm just going to lock this layer in place. I can do so by clicking right over here next to the little eyeball icon. That's going to toggle the lock so I can't accidentally move the image around. And I'm going to double click to name this layer Image Template. Now I want to create a separate layer where all my drawing is going to go. I don't want my drawing to go on top of the template because the idea is that eventually I'm going to make this invisible so you can't see it anymore. So I'm going to click on the new layer icon and I'm going to call this one Drawing. And from here I can basically use a combination of drawing tools so that I can trace the contours of the dog and start filling in all the details. I'm going to flip over to the Properties panel just so it makes it easier for me to see what I'm doing. And now I'm going to start using my pen tools so I can start tracing the contours of the image. Let me zoom in just a little bit. I just suggest zooming in whenever you're going to work on the finer details. Like for example, if I was going to work on the eyes and the nose, I would want to zoom in all the way so that it makes it easier for me to see what I'm doing. There's two pen tools. There's the regular pen tool, which is really good at making straight lines and hard lines. And then there's a curvature tool, which is really good at making curves, as the name implies. Some people like using the pen tool. I am not one of those people. I've never liked it. So instead, I'm going to use the curvature tool, just because it gives me a little bit more flexibility. With the curvature tool, I'm going to start at the top of the image. And you can see that as I start dragging down and dropping anchors, it helps me to curve around the object. I forgot to mention this actually, so let me Control Z and go back. First, before I move any forward, I want to make sure the fill is set to none. So in my properties panel, you can see that the fill was set to white because I hadn't noticed it before. So I'm going to make sure the fill is set to none by clicking on this little swatch with the line over it. And I'm going to make sure the stroke is set to black and to a high enough point size that I can see it. So I think I'm going to set it to about 2 points, which should make it noticeable for me. And then as we progress, we're going to mess around with the appearance a little more. But anyway, now that I fixed the fill, I'm going to start at the top. I'm going to start dragging anchors. And you can see it's leaving a line as I go and start tracing the hat that the dog is wearing. It doesn't need to be perfect. What I like about the curvature tool is that it helps you to create curves a lot more easily, and it doesn't look so fake in my opinion. You can always Control Z if you don't like a particular anchor point and you need to fix it, like I did just a moment ago. To close the path, I'm going to click on the very first anchor point I made right here, and now that's basically one closed shape. If I wanted to, I could go and fill it now to start seeing what it would look like as a vector drawing. So clearly I have a long way to go. I'm not going to fill it now. I'm actually just going to go and continue tracing different areas in the dog. So I think right now I'm going to do the overall body. Just like if I was working on a traditional drawing, I want to focus on the big shapes in the image before I work on the minor details like the nose, the eyes, the teeth, and so forth. You can see that as I drag underneath it, it kind of creates a line right below where the artboard should be, like that really strong curve, and I'm not worried about it. I'm going to show you afterwards how I'm going to delete that using the shape builder tool. So if that happens to you and you're worried about it, don't be. You can see how I'm also overlapping the hat, but that's okay because I'm going to fix the stacking order and it's not going to look so weird in the end. Okay, so don't worry if that happens to you where it created this really thick curve right underneath the artboard, or if you go over some of the other objects you've drawn, because we're going to fill it and then mess around with the stacking order and it's not going to look so bad. In fact, I'm actually going to go to my layers panel right now and I'm going to just briefly toggle the visibility of the image template, and you can see what the drawing starts to look like without that image in place. Make sure I'm on my drawing layer, and now I'm going to continue working on some other areas of my image. For example, I really want to make the eyes and the nose and the mouth so I can fill them with different colors. So using the same tool, curvature tool, just going and tracing. Now as for all the fur on the dog, I'm not really that concerned about recreating the fur, because one of the things about flat design is that you have flat areas of color, so that's the whole appearance that we're going for, just flat areas of color. So I'm not as interested in recreating a perfect fur texture. You can see I'm going slightly off of the original image, and that's okay because I just wanted to look a little bit more cartoony. So I'm going to elongate the nose and I'm going to make certain things stand out a little bit more. You can see that as I'm trying to go and trace over the teeth, I'm making a pretty general drawing of the outline of the teeth. I'm not going and outlining every single tooth. It's up to you if you want to take the time to do it a little bit more detailed. I don't. I just want to focus on some of the overall large shapes. And then later on I can go and make some markings on top if I wanted some of the minor details, like the fangs, for example, stand out. It's okay to overlap, you guys. Don't be afraid to overlap, because later we're going to fix the stacking order and it's not going to look so messy. Every now and then I suggest you guys zoom out and make the image template invisible and see what the overall drawing looks like. So now I'm ready to start filling it in. I could theoretically select one of these paths, and I know they're selected when there's that red bounding box around the path, and select from one of the swatches that is available for me in the swatches panel. I could theoretically do that. There's nothing wrong with that. However, I want a wider range of shades, and I really like the soft yellow of the hat in the reference image. So with that path selected, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually flip to tool number 12, which is my eyedropper tool. And when I click on the eyedropper tool on one area in the reference image, you can see how it goes and just fills that path with that beautiful color. I'll do the same thing by selecting the overall shape of the dog and then selecting tool number 12, the eyedropper tool, and I'm going to click somewhere in the fur so I could try to mimic the color in the fur as best as possible. It's not always going to be perfect, and you may have to go and try it a few times, but it does give you a wider range of options than you would necessarily have if you were just trying to use the swatches panel. So I think I like that tan color. I know I definitely need to fix that issue right here where it overlaps the hat. So I'm going to right click on that path. I'm going to select arrange and I'm going to select send backwards. So now you can see the hat is overlapping and it looks a little bit more normal, the way I want it to look. So you know what? I'm actually going to go and make the dog feel invisible for a minute just so I can focus on the rest of the areas. I'm going to select the nose. The path selected when I see that red bounding box. I'm going to use the eyedropper tool and just kind of try to sample the gray of the nose. I think I'm going to make it a little bit more black. And I'll do the same. Let me zoom in so you guys can see what I'm doing. I'll do the same for the mouth, teeth, and other areas in the image. If you don't like these colors, then you can go, of course, and select the colors that are available to you in the swatches. You can also create your own swatches from scratch, but that's another thing for another day. I don't really want to go into those things right now. Okay, so reviewing my progress, I see that there's several things that I need to work on to make this image a little bit more professional and more realistic. I made the reference layer invisible, and I can make it visible again. I can see some of the areas that I need to fill, like right over here in the hat, right over here in the snout connecting to the nose, and then I can just go and eliminate the bottom that was extending past the artboard. So I'm going to make that template invisible again, and first thing I'm going to do is actually eliminate this area right here. To do so, I'm going to use my shape builder. I'm going to first drag out a line segment, and I'm going to make sure the line segment has a stroke color so I can actually see what I'm doing. And I'm going to click and drag like so to create my line segment. And then, having created the line segment, I'm going to select both of the overall shape of the dog as well as the line segment like so. I know they're both selected because I see that red bounding box. I'm going to use tool number 10, my shape builder tool, and you can see this as I drag over it, I got this mesh like texture, but I'm going to ignore that for now. Hold down Alt, and you can see when I hold down Alt there's a minus next to my cursor, which means I'll be eliminating whatever I click on. So I'm going to click on the bottom of the image. You can see how it basically just took out that whole chunk of the dog that was beneath the artboard. I no longer need that line segment, so I'm going to select it and get rid of it. And now I can work on the other areas that are problematic. So if I zoom in over here, you can see that that little gap is really bothering me. I'm going to select the hat, and I'm actually going to use my direct selection tool, which is the right arrow. And I'm basically going to click on the anchor points like so and drag to extend those areas so that they are touching the dog itself. I'm not going for perfection here. I just want it to look a little bit less problematic. I don't want any little like gaps or anything. Okay, so if I zoom out, I can see that it kind of looks like the hat is dipping around the doggy's profile. Now I'm actually going to do the same and fix the nose and how it doesn't connect to the snout. Some of you guys may not have this problem, and great for you. I do, so I'm going to take a moment to fix it. If you guys do have that problem and you need to fix it, that's how you basically do it. You just have to go and use your direct selection tool and then just kind of double click on the anchor points and drag them, expand them, just make them kind of fit so that they align with whatever other parts in your drawing you have. Alright, so after I made my changes, it really doesn't look that bad. It's looking a lot better. I'm now going to go in and I'm actually going to drag a marquee over all of these shapes with the selection tool, and I can see that each of these has a different fill but no stroke. So I'm going to go and add a stroke. I want it to have a very flat cartoony look, so I'm going to add a black stroke of about 2 points like so, and it has more of that cartoony outline that I was looking for. However, I don't want it to just be one uniform outline. I want it to look a little bit more hand-drawn. So to create a more hand-drawn cartoon aesthetic, when I go and add my black stroke, I'm actually going to go and click to expand the stroke panel. And right over here where it says profile, it gives you the kind of line that you're giving your stroke. So right now it's set to uniform, which means it's going to be the same thickness throughout. But I don't want it to have the same thickness, so I'm actually going to go and experiment with some of these different profiles. And you can see that when I do so, it makes the line a little bit different. It makes the line thicker in certain areas. If I go and really zoom in, you can see how some areas it looks thicker, some areas it looks thinner, almost as if a cartoonist had gone and drawn it with a pen. And that's a look that I'm really digging. I really like how it has that more hand-drawn aesthetic, and it's kind of bridging for me the gap between digital and traditional. If you guys don't like that, then you can always leave the profile uniform, but I'm gonna go with a more hand-drawn look. And now, having done that, I can go and start adding in some details in the overall drawing. And here's what I mean by details. So I'm gonna go in my layers panel, I'm gonna make the image template visible again, and I'm going to toggle the visibility of my drawing temporarily. And you can see by details, I mean, like for example, the fold in the hat right here, the whiskers, the highlight on the nose. I could theoretically do every piece of fur, but I'm not going to. All of those are going to add a little bit more life to my drawing so far. So it might help if you actually have the image open next to you as reference. So what I'm going to do, I think, is I'm going to add a separate layer, and in this separate layer I'm just going to open the image. I'm going to place the same image yet again and just have it next to me as reference here in the pasteboard. So I'm just going to call this one second reference in the layers panel and lock it in place. I'm going to go back to my drawing layer, and then I can just go and start adding more marks on top. So some things that I want to focus on, for example, I want to add a little bit of a fold right over here for the hat so it doesn't look like just like a cone. I'm going to use my curvature tool and I'm going to make sure that I have no fill to it. And I do have a stroke of about 2 points again. And I'm going to select that stroke profile I was using before. And then with my curvature tool, I'm just going to go and drag out a little line to make it look like the fold of the hat. Whenever you don't want to continue your path, you just click escape. And then the path can just be an open path, like basically a line. I could theoretically use the same tool and just kind of do some of the creases in the hat like so. In fact, I'm going to try it out, and if I don't like it, I can always just delete those lines from my drawing. Not liking them, but whatever. I can always just go and get rid of the ones I don't want. So I think I'm just going to create the illusion of a curve here. I'm going to make sure I create some whiskers. I'm going to create some highlights. To do so, I'm just going to zoom in, for example, on the highlight and create a little ellipse of sorts, more like an oval, and then maybe fill it with a little bit of white so it serves as a highlight. Add a little yellow to warm it up. That's what it looks like when I zoom out of it. I think I'll also try to create some of the whiskers. So I'm going to zoom in on where the snout would be, and then just create a series of these little elliptical shapes. And then to make my life easier, I might just go and like duplicate them. You can duplicate by holding Alt and dragging. And slowly you're going to see that it starts adding a little bit more dimension to your flat portrait. Alright, so I'm going to pause here and I'm going to continue working on some of the details, and then once I feel like I have added enough details and I'm happy with it, I will show you guys the final result. Okay, I added enough detail to the image so that I'm happy with it. I'm not as happy as I was with my initial example, but I think I had just selected a better image to start off with than this one, as cute as it is with the dog wearing the hat. No big deal, I'm just gonna go forward. I'm going to eliminate now the second reference image that I had added because I no longer need it. I was able to add some minor details like these lines, so you can see are helping to define the curves in the dog and the folds in the hat and so forth, and I added all these whiskers and the highlight on the nose. Unfortunately, there wasn't much I could do with the eyes, so I'm just going to have to accept it and move on. I'm going to open up my layers panel, and I'm going to now delete that second reference because I don't really need it anymore. I guess theoretically I could make it invisible, but I'm just going to delete it so I don't get confused by it. And the image template should still be locked, so I don't really need to deal with it. What I actually want to do is add a background color to it, just like I was doing with this image of the shepherd, where I added that little cream background to complement my portrait and give it a more finished look. I'm going to select my image template layer, and I'm going to go down to the bottom of the layers panel and click on the create new layer icon, and I'm going to call this one background. It should be underneath the drawing layer so that you don't have to play around with the stacking order. And now what I'm going to do for the background is essentially, let me zoom out here so you guys can see what I'm doing. I'm essentially going to use the rectangle tool and drag out a rectangle and extend it from one end of the artboard to the other, like so. I'm going to resize it slightly. And then in my properties panel, I'm going to eliminate the stroke, and I'm just going to leave a fill for the background color. I recommend using a color that is somehow complementary to the colors that you were using in the portrait itself. I like this mauve color, which just matches pretty much what I was using in the tongue, and it complements the hat, the yellow of the hat, so I'm going to leave it in that color. Alright, so this is the final design and I'm ready to export it. I'm going to actually export it in PDF format because that is an optimal format for printing purposes. Once I do convert it to a PDF though, it will be like more of a raster format, so you do have the possibility of running into pixelation if you try to print it larger than the letter size document that we set it up as. However, there are options if you do intend to resize it without wanting to lose quality. Earlier I had taught you guys to go to File and Export whenever we export it in a raster format such as JPEG or PNG. In this case, however, I'm going to go to File and Save As, and I'm going to name it. So I'm going to name this one number 2 or version 2, and under Save As type, you know that by default it's going to have Adobe Illustrator or AI selected, which is the native format for Illustrator. But I'm going to select Adobe PDF so that it's pretty much optimal for printing. If I wanted to print without running into any resizing issues, I would select Illustrator EPS, which retains the vector format. Right now that's not an option, so I'm going to leave it at Adobe PDF. I'm going to click Save, and then I'm actually going to check off where it says Optimize for Fast Web View, just so it makes it easier for me to view it and share it with people online as well as in print. And I'm going to click Save PDF, and I know it's saved automatically to my desktop because that's the location I had selected. So hopefully by now you guys have a really cute vector portrait that you guys can share with the world and submit to me on Canvas. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will check you guys out later.